At her wedding, her sister stood up and said, "I'm pregnant with your groom's baby." The crowd gasped, and she froze in shock. Then her 8-year-old nephew stood and said, "That's a lie. I can prove it." The room fell silent, and what followed changed everything. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to another story that will shake you to your core. You know, from the very first story I shared with you, you've been my heartbeat. Through every twist, every revelation, every moment of truth, you've walked this journey with me. You're not just viewers clicking a video. You're my family, my strength, my reason for sitting here, finding these stories and bringing them to light. And today, before we dive into this story, I want to lift you up in prayer. May the Almighty wrap you in unshakable peace today. May every woman reading this be blessed with dignity that no one can steal and power that rises from within. May every man be blessed with wisdom to see truth and grace to act with honor. May your homes overflow with laughter that heals and love that endures. May your children grow with light in their eyes and courage in their hearts. And when the weight of this world tries to pull you down, may God's hand lift you higher than your deepest fears. You are loved beyond what words can capture. You are blessed beyond what circumstances show. And you are never, ever forgotten in my prayers. If your heart resonates with these words, show me you're here. Like this video. And if you're riding with me on this journey, if you believe in truth and justice, comment below, "I am with you." Now, let me tell you about Vanessa. The last thing Vanessa Cole remembered before her world imploded was the weight of her mother's pearl choker against her throat. It had been her mother's. Before that, her grandmother's. 3 generations of Cole women had worn it on their wedding day, and now it pressed against Vanessa's skin like a promise. A legacy of love that had survived loss, hardship, and time. She had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, it would feel like a noose. The late September sun poured through the tall windows of the Riverside estate, a converted Victorian manor overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't a traditional church. Vanessa had never been traditional. The exposed brick walls were draped in soft ivory fabric. Candles flickered on every surface. 230 guests filled the mismatched vintage chairs that Vanessa had personally chosen because she wanted her wedding to feel like home, not a production. Her father, Richard, squeezed her arm as they stood at the back of the ceremony space, waiting for their cue. His eyes were already glassy with tears. "Your mother would have loved this," he whispered. Vanessa's mother had died when she was 16, breast cancer, fast and cruel. For years, it had just been Vanessa and her dad, building a life from the pieces. Then 5 years ago, Richard had married Helen Brennan, a widow with a daughter of her own. Vanessa's stepsister, Paige. Paige stood near the altar now, in her burgundy bridesmaid dress, the color Vanessa had let her choose, even though it clashed slightly with the blush tones of everything else. Paige had been cold to Vanessa for years, resentful, competitive. They'd barely spoken beyond forced pleasantries at family dinners. But then, 1 month ago, everything had changed. Paige had shown up at Vanessa's apartment, tears streaming down her face. "I've been awful to you," she'd sobbed, jealous, bitter. "You lost your mom, but you still had your dad's whole heart. I felt invisible next to you, but I'm tired of being angry. You're the only sister I have. Please, let me be part of your day." Vanessa had held her, feeling something crack open inside her chest. Forgiveness, hope, the possibility that blended families could actually blend. So she'd made Paige a bridesmaid, let her help with planning, tried to build a bridge. Now, as the string quartet began playing Canon in D, Vanessa looked toward the altar and saw him. Cameron Foster. 6'1", dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, the kind of smile that made strangers trust him instantly. He built foster development for nothing, buying distressed properties, renovating them, turning them into affordable housing. He wasn't a billionaire, wasn't flashy, but he'd worked his way to 7 figures through grit and a genuine desire to give working families a chance at home ownership. And somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen Vanessa. Vanessa, who wore scrubs more than dresses. Vanessa, who spent her days in the pediatric ICU holding the hands of terrified parents. Vanessa, who still drove her mom's old Camry because she couldn't bear to let it go. Cameron stood at the altar now, and when his eyes found hers, they filled with tears. This was it, the beginning of everything. Vanessa took her first step down the aisle, past her college roommate, who'd flown in from Seattle, past Cameron's business partner, who'd become a close friend, past Helen, her stepmother, who wore cream to a wedding, again, but Vanessa had let it go, past her nephew, 8-year-old Benji, Paige's son, who stood near the front in his tiny suit, holding the ring pillow with the kind of seriousness only a child can muster. Benji had always been Vanessa's little shadow. Even when Paige had been cold, Benji had adored his Aunt Vanessa. He'd colored her pictures, saved her seats at family dinners, called her Aunt V like it was a superhero name. She caught his eye now and winked. He grinned back, gap-toothed and proud. 10 steps from the altar, Vanessa felt her heart swell so large it hurt. This was her family, imperfect, patched together, but hers. And in 60 seconds, Cameron would be family too. 8 steps from the altar, the music faltered. 6 steps from the altar, Paige moved. She stepped out of her place in the bridesmaid lineup. Her hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture that looked rehearsed, theatrical, deliberate. Vanessa's feet stopped moving. "I can't let you do this." Paige's voice rang out across the space, clear and trembling. The string quartet stopped mid-note. 230 people turned to stare. Vanessa's father's grip on her arm tightened so hard it hurt. At the altar, Cameron's face went from joy to confusion to horror in 3 seconds flat. "I can't let you marry him," Paige continued, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine anguish, without knowing the truth. "No." Vanessa felt the room tilt. "I'm pregnant." Paige's hand pressed against her stomach, her eyes filled with tears. 13 weeks pregnant, with Cameron's baby. The room exploded. Someone screamed. Vanessa's aunt shouted, "What?" The guests erupted into a roar of shock and fury and disbelief that made Vanessa's ears ring. But Vanessa only had eyes for Cameron. He stood frozen at the altar, his face drained of all color, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. "Say something." Vanessa's voice came out strangled, desperate. "Cameron, tell them she's lying." He stared at her, his hands shaking at his sides, and said nothing. That silence hit Vanessa like a fist to the chest. It was confirmation, admission, guilt wrapped in empty air. "I'm so sorry, Vanessa." Paige's voice trembled. She looked down at her stomach with a tenderness that made Vanessa want to scream. "It happened after your engagement party. Cameron had too much to drink. I was upset because Mom kept comparing me to you again. We were both vulnerable. We talked in the garden, and one thing led to another." The story sounded real, too real. The engagement party had been 3 months ago. 13 weeks. The timeline matched perfectly. "I found out 3 weeks ago," Paige continued, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell you. You were so happy. But I took Cameron to my doctor's appointment last Tuesday, and when he saw the ultrasound... Stop. Vanessa's voice came out as a whisper, but somehow it carried. Just stop. She looked at Cameron again, begging him with her eyes to deny it, to fight, to say anything that would make this nightmare end. But he just stood there, his face gray, his mouth opening and closing like he was drowning on dry land. His silence told her everything. Something inside Vanessa snapped. You son of a bitch. She didn't decide to move. Her body moved for her. 1 second she was standing beside her father. The next, she was lunging at Paige, her hands reaching for her stepsister's face, her hair, anything she could destroy the way they'd just destroyed her. Now, family, I need you to pause and think about something. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to have that trust shattered in front of everyone you love? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happens next, you won't believe. Vanessa's hands caught Paige's dress, tearing the delicate fabric. They went down together, crashing into the front row of vintage chairs. The sound of wood splintering mixed with gasps and screams. You're insane, Paige shrieked, covering her stomach protectively. You're going to hurt my baby. There is no baby, Vanessa screamed back. But even as the words left her mouth, doubt crept in like poison. Cameron still hadn't spoken. He stood at the altar like a statue, and his silence was damning. Hands grabbed Vanessa from behind, Cameron's groomsman pulling her off Paige with force. Vanessa thrashed against them, feeling her wedding dress tear at the shoulder seam. The sound of stitches popping seemed impossibly loud. Let go of me. Helen appeared from nowhere, rushing to Paige's side with theatrical concern. She helped her daughter to her feet, checking her for injuries with the kind of maternal worry that looked almost too perfect. Vanessa, darling, you need to calm down. Helen's voice dripped with false sympathy. I know this is devastating, but violence isn't the answer. Think about the baby. Don't you dare. Vanessa's voice came out raw. Don't you dare act like you care about me. Where were you when she was sleeping with my fiancé? I didn't know. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Sweetheart, Paige just told me this morning. She was terrified, ashamed. She wanted to keep it secret, but I convinced her you deserved the truth. Better now than after you're legally bound to him. The way Helen said it, so reasonable, so kind, made Vanessa feel like she was losing her mind. Helen had never called her darling or sweetheart in 5 years. Never shown her anything but cool politeness. But now she looked at Vanessa with something that almost resembled concern. It felt like a performance. But why? For whose benefit? Vanessa looked around the room, at the faces of everyone she loved, all staring at her with pity and horror and the kind of fascinated disgust people reserve for car crashes. She looked down at her dress. The shoulder was torn. The skirt had a footprint on it. Her carefully pinned hair had fallen loose. She looked exactly like what they wanted her to look like. A hysterical woman who couldn't control herself. I need to leave. The words came out disconnected, like someone else was speaking through her. I need to get out of here. She pushed through the hands trying to restrain her, hiking up her ruined dress. The ceremony space stretched endlessly. The door seemed miles away. Behind her, she finally heard Cameron speak. Vanessa, wait, please. You have to let me explain. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If she stopped moving, she would shatter completely. And she refused to break in front of all these people. Refused to give them that satisfaction. She burst through the doors into the late September afternoon. The parking lot was decorated with her carefully chosen vintage cars. Cameron's restored 1967 Mustang in the front, draped with flowers and tin cans. "Just married" was written across the back window in white paint. The sight of it made something rupture in Vanessa's chest. Her legs gave out. She collapsed between two cars, her dress pooling around her like spilled cream. The asphalt was hot beneath her, burning through the layers of tulle and silk, but she couldn't make herself move, couldn't make herself do anything but sit there, while her entire future dissolved. She heard running footsteps, multiple voices, shouting her name. "Vanessa! Someone call 911. Get her some water." Cameron's voice rose above the others, desperate and broken. "Vanessa, Vanessa, please, listen to me. I never touched her. I swear on everything, I never touched her." But the words reached Vanessa through a strange fog. The parking lot started spinning. The September sun became too bright, too hot, burning through her skull like a laser. Someone was screaming. It took Vanessa several long seconds to realize the sound was coming from her own throat. Then the world went blessedly, mercifully black. She woke to whiteness, white walls, white ceiling tiles with small holes that made patterns when she stared at them long enough. White sheets pulled up to her chest. An IV line snaked into her left arm. Hospital. Vanessa turned her head slowly. Her mouth tasted like cotton and old metal. Her body felt hollow, like someone had scooped out her insides and left only the shell. A nurse noticed her stirring and came over with practiced efficiency. "You're awake, good. You've been out for about 2 days. Severe dehydration and shock. Your body essentially shut down to protect itself." 2 days. Vanessa stared at the ceiling and tried to process that. 2 days of nothing. 2 days of mercy. "There's someone who's been waiting to see you." The nurse continued, checking the IV. "He's been sleeping in the waiting room since you were admitted. Won't leave, even when we tell him visiting hours are over. Won't go home, even to shower. Cameron." Vanessa's chest tightened. She didn't know if she could face him. Didn't know if she could hear whatever explanation he had, whatever lies or truths were waiting. "I don't want," she started. But the door burst open, and it wasn't Cameron. It was Benji. Her 8-year-old nephew ran into the room, his face blotchy and tear-streaked. His little suit from the wedding was wrinkled and stained. His Spider-Man sneakers squeaked on the linoleum floor. "Aunt V." He threw himself at her bed, grabbing her hand with both of his small ones. "Aunt V, don't believe her. She's lying. Mom's lying about everything." Behind him, Paige appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with panic. "Benji, get back here. Don't you dare." "She's lying," Benji shouted, his voice high and desperate. "There's no baby from Cameron. She made it all up. I heard her." The room went completely still. Vanessa stared at her nephew, at his honest, terrified eyes, at the way Paige had gone from grieving sister to something that looked a lot like fear. "What did you say?" Vanessa's voice came out as a whisper. Benji squeezed her hand tighter. "I heard her practicing. The night before the wedding. She was in the bathroom, practicing crying in the mirror. And I heard her on the phone with Grandma Helen. She said, 'The plan is working. Cameron will look guilty. Vanessa will run, and we'll finally get everything.'" Family. This is where everything changes. A child, innocent and honest, about to expose a conspiracy that goes deeper than anyone imagined. Have you ever had a moment where a child told you a truth that adults were hiding? Drop a comment below. The hospital room seemed to freeze. Every sound, the beeping monitors, the distant hallway chatter, even Vanessa's own breathing, faded into background static. Benji's words hung in the air, like smoke. What did you just say? Vanessa sat up slowly, ignoring the pull of the IV line, her eyes locked on her nephew's face, searching for any sign of confusion or childish misunderstanding. But Benji's eyes were clear, determined, terrified, yes, but certain. I heard her, he repeated, his voice shaking but firm. Mom was practicing in the bathroom. She kept saying the same things over and over, trying to make herself cry. I'm so sorry, Vanessa. I never meant for this to happen. Like she was rehearsing for a play. Paige lunged forward, grabbing for Benji's arm. That's enough. You don't know what you're talking about. You're 8 years old. You misunderstood. I'm not stupid. Benji jerked away from her, pressing himself against Vanessa's hospital bed. And I'm not lying. The door opened wider. Helen stepped in, her face a mask of concerned grandmotherly warmth. But Vanessa saw something flicker in her eyes when she looked at Benji. Something cold. Sweetheart, Helen said softly, moving toward Benji with outstretched arms. You're confused. You had a nightmare, remember? We talked about this. It wasn't a nightmare. Benji's voice cracked. He pulled out his phone, the one Paige had given him for emergencies, with trembling hands. I recorded them. I recorded everything. The room went dead silent. Paige's face transformed. The grief, the remorse, the wounded sister act. All of it drained away in an instant, replaced by something raw and panicked. Benji, give me that phone, right now. No. Benji held it behind his back, looking at Vanessa. Aunt V needs to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this. Cameron appeared in the doorway then, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw Vanessa awake, his face crumpled with relief. Thank God. Vanessa, I've been trying to see you, but they said family only. Stay, Vanessa said quietly, her eyes never leaving Benji. You need to hear this too. Benji's hands shook as he unlocked his phone and pulled up a recording. This is from 2 nights before the wedding. I woke up to use the bathroom, and I heard them talking in Grandma Helen's office. The door was cracked open. He pressed play. The audio was muffled at first, distant, but clear enough. Paige's voice came through first, anxious and sharp. Are you sure the ultrasound looks real enough? Helen's voice responded, calm and calculating. It's perfect, darling. I paid $500 for a custom one. Shows 13 weeks. Your name, yesterday's date. It'll hold up to a quick glance, and that's all we need. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. What if Benji heard us planning? Paige's recorded voice continued. He's been acting weird lately, watching me. He's 8, Helen said dismissively. No one will believe a child over 2 grown women. Just stick to the story exactly as we practiced. Drunk Cameron, emotional you, garden at the engagement party. Details make it believable. And if Cameron denies it, his denial doesn't matter. His silence will. Men always freeze when accused of something like this. Even when they're innocent, it's guilt by association. Vanessa will see him not defending himself, and she'll break. She'll run. And once she's gone, we execute phase 2. The trust fund. The trust fund, Helen confirmed. Once Vanessa is out of the picture, emotionally destroyed and legally unmarried, your father's will become contestable. We already have the forged documents showing that Richard intended to split everything equally between you and Vanessa, not give her the majority. With her credibility destroyed and you pregnant with Cameron's baby, public sympathy shifts to you. We get the $2.8 million, and Vanessa gets nothing. But Vanessa couldn't hear it anymore, over the ringing in her ears. 2.8 million. Her father's life insurance, his retirement accounts, the sale of her childhood home that had gone into a trust for her after he'd remarried Helen, specifically to protect Vanessa's inheritance. Money Vanessa had planned to use to open a free clinic for underserved communities. Money she'd told Cameron she didn't even want for herself, that she wanted to use to help people. This was never about Cameron. It was always about the money. Turn it off. Paige's voice came out strangled. She lunged for the phone, but Cameron moved faster, stepping between her and Benji. Don't, Cameron said quietly, his voice harder than Vanessa had ever heard it. Don't you dare touch him. Helen's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. That recording is taken out of context. We were discussing— There's more, Benji interrupted. He scrolled on his phone, his small fingers moving quickly. I took pictures too, of the fake ultrasound, of the documents in Grandma Helen's office, of her search history on her computer. He held up the phone, swiping through images. Vanessa saw them flash by. A crisp ultrasound image with Paige Brennan, 13 weeks, printed clearly at the top. A receipt from a website called prankpregnancy.com for $500. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, small amounts, $2,000 here, $5,000 there, all moving from an account in Vanessa's father's name to one in Helen's name, dated after his death. A forged will. Side by side with what looked like the real one, differences highlighted in Benji's careful handwriting. And then, a screenshot of Helen's browser history. How to contest a trust fund. Proving emotional instability in court. Can a wedding scandal affect inheritance? How long does a fake pregnancy need to last? I didn't understand all of it, Benji said quietly, looking up at Vanessa. But I knew it was wrong. I knew they were planning to hurt you, so I kept looking. I found papers in Grandma's desk. I found emails on her computer when she left it unlocked. I took pictures of everything. Vanessa felt like she was falling, even though she was lying perfectly still in the hospital bed. Helen's face had gone from warm to cold to something approaching desperate. And you made my mom mean too. Paige was backing toward the door now, her hand fumbling for the handle. This is insane. I'm not listening to a child's fantasy. Then explain the ultrasound, Cameron said, his voice like ice. Explain the recording. Explain why you never once actually showed Vanessa any proof. No doctor's information, no medical records, just a story and crocodile tears. Security guards appeared in the doorway then, summoned by the nurse who'd slipped out during the commotion. But right behind them came two police officers. And behind them, Vanessa's father, Richard, his face pale and stricken. I called them, Richard said quietly, looking at Helen with an expression of complete betrayal. Benji sent me the recordings and photos an hour ago. I've been sitting in the parking lot trying to process this. Trying to convince myself it couldn't be true. But it is, isn't it, Helen? Helen's mask finally shattered completely. You have no idea what it's like, she hissed, all pretense of warmth gone. Watching you dote on her, Saint Vanessa, perfect Vanessa, your precious daughter, who can do no wrong, while my Paige gets scraps of your attention. We deserved that money. We deserved more than we got. You got love, Richard said, his voice breaking. You got a home. You got a family. What more did you want? Everything, Helen said simply. We wanted everything. One of the officers stepped forward. Helen Brennan, Paige Brennan, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. Listen, family. Sometimes the people closest to you, the ones who sit at your dinner table, who smile in your photos, are the ones planning your destruction. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was plotting against you? Tell me in the comments, because what comes next gets even darker. The police didn't arrest Helen and Paige right there in the hospital room. Not yet. But they did separate them, taking Helen to one empty patient room and Paige to another for questioning. Vanessa sat in her hospital bed, Benji curled up beside her, his small body shaking with adrenaline and fear. Cameron stood by the window, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring out at nothing. Richard sat in the corner chair, his head in his hands. The lead detective, a woman named Torres, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, pulled up a chair beside Vanessa's bed. "I know you're still processing all of this," Detective Torres said gently. "But I need to understand the full scope. Benji, can you walk me through everything you found?" Benji nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He pulled out his phone again, this time scrolling more slowly through this photo gallery. "I started noticing stuff about 2 months ago," he said quietly. "Mom would get off the phone really fast whenever I came into the room. And Grandma Helen kept having these long meetings with Mom in her office with the door closed. They never used to do that." "What made you start investigating?" Torres asked. Benji looked down at his hands. "I heard Mom crying one night. She said to Grandma Helen, 'I can't keep pretending to be nice to her. It makes me sick.' I thought she meant me at first. But then Grandma said, 'It's almost over. Once the wedding is ruined, Vanessa will be gone, and we can finally get what we deserve.'" Vanessa's chest tightened. 2 months. They'd been planning this for at least 2 months, maybe longer. "So I started paying attention," Benji continued. "I'd sneak to Grandma's office when she wasn't home. She keeps everything in these files. She's really organized." He said it with a child's observation, no judgment, just fact. He pulled up a photo. "This is the fake ultrasound. I found it in a folder labeled Phase 1. There were other folders too. Phase 2 and Phase 3. Torres leaned forward. "Did you look in those folders?" "Yes." Benji swiped to the next image. Phase 2 was about the money. Grandpa Richard's trust fund for Aunt V. There were papers that Grandma had made that looked like legal documents, but with different words than the real ones. The photo showed 2 documents side by side. Even Vanessa could see the differences now that she was looking for them. The forged will divided everything equally between her and Paige. The real will, the one her father had shown her years ago, left the bulk of the estate to Vanessa, with a generous but smaller portion to Helen for her lifetime care. "The real will is in a safe deposit box at First National Bank," Richard said hollowly from the corner. "I made sure of it after my first wife died. I wanted Vanessa protected. I never imagined Helen would." "So, what about Phase 3? Torres asked Benji. But Benji's face went pale. He looked at Vanessa, then at his grandfather, then back at Torres. It was a life insurance policy, with Paige Brennan listed as the beneficiary. Under relationship to insured, someone had typed common law spouse and mother of his children. "That's not real," Cameron said, immediately, moving away from the window. "I never signed that. I don't even have a $5 million policy. My actual policy is for $500,000, and Vanessa is the beneficiary. I changed it the day after we got engaged." Torres took a photo of Benji's screen with her own phone. "This is forgery. And if they were planning to claim this after your marriage to Vanessa was destroyed," quote. She trailed off, but everyone in the room understood the implication. They were going to kill Cameron, quote, make it look like an accident. Paige would claim they'd been secretly together, that she was pregnant with his babies, plural, based on the fake ultrasound showing twins. That she deserved the insurance payout as the mother of his children and his common-law partner. "There's more," Benji whispered. He swiped to another photo, this one of a handwritten note in Helen's distinctive sloping cursive. Timeline: September 28, destroy wedding complete. October 15, file forged will for probate. Quote, November 1, CF, accident. Make it look natural, car brake line, or fall. November 15, PB files for insurance claim. Quote, December 1, inheritance and insurance clear, leave state. Quote, CF, Cameron Foster. P.B. Paige Brennan. Period. "That's my mom's handwriting," Benji said, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I know her handwriting. She was going to hurt him and pretend it was an accident." Vanessa felt like she couldn't breathe. The room was spinning again, but this time she fought to stay conscious, fought to stay present for Benji, who'd been brave enough to expose all of this. "When did you find this timeline?" Torres asked. "Yesterday morning. The day of the wedding. I found it in Mom's purse when she was in the shower. I took a picture, and I called Grandpa Richard, but he didn't answer. So, I called the police." Benji looked at Torres. "I called the police station and told them my mom was going to ruin a wedding, and that I had proof. The lady on the phone said she'd send someone, but I don't think she believed me." "We received the call," Torres said gently. "We sent an officer to the venue, but by the time he arrived, the wedding had already been disrupted and you'd left in an ambulance. We've been trying to piece together what happened. Your evidence just filled in all the gaps." There was a commotion in the hallway, raised voices. Then Helen appeared in the doorway, a uniformed officer gripping her arm. "You can't do this," Helen was saying, her voice high and strained. "I have rights. I want a lawyer. This is all a misunderstanding. Save it," Torres said, standing. She looked at the officer. "Did she confess to anything?" "Not exactly, but she did try to destroy her phone when we asked to see it. We stopped her in time. Tech is pulling the data now." Helen's eyes found Benji across the room. The look she gave him was pure venom. "You little traitor. After everything I did for you. After everything we gave you." "You gave me lies," Benji said, his voice small but steady. "You made Mom into a liar too, and you were going to hurt people. I had to tell." Richard stood up, moving to place himself between Helen and his grandson. "Don't you dare speak to him. Don't you dare even look at him." "Oh, now you're the protective father?" Helen spat. "Where was this energy when your precious Vanessa got everything and my daughter got nothing? Where was this fairness when you made that will, leaving her millions and Paige scraps?" "Paige got a full college education, paid for," Richard said, his voice shaking with rage. "She got a car, she got a wedding, she got a home to live in, rent-free, until she was 26. She got love. But it was never enough for you, was it? You married me for money, not love. You saw a widower with a daughter and a comfortable life, and you saw an opportunity." Helen laughed, but it sounded brittle. "You were so easy, so desperate for someone to help you raise your daughter, so guilty about poor little Vanessa losing her mommy. I played the part perfectly. The caring stepmother, the supportive wife. But I earned every penny of that life, Richard. I earned it by pretending to care about your daughter for 5 years." The words hit Vanessa like physical blows. 5 years of family dinners. 5 years of birthday cards signed Love Helen. 5 years of believing that maybe, just maybe, she'd found a second mother. "All of it a lie, Helen Brennan," Torres said, pulling out handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, forgery, and attempted grand theft. You have the right to remain silent." "This is ridiculous." Helen struggled as the officer turned her around to cuff her hands behind her back. "You can't prove any of this. It's the word of a child, and some out-of-context documents. We have recordings, Torres said calmly. We have forged documents. We have a clear timeline of intent. And we have your search history, which according to your computer's forensics includes research on brake line tampering and undetectable poisons. We can prove all of it. As they led Helen out, Paige was brought in next, also in handcuffs. She looked smaller somehow, defeated. When she saw Benji, she started crying. Baby, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to see this. I was doing this for us. For our future. You were doing it for you, Benji said quietly. You always do everything for you. Paige flinched like he'd slapped her. Paige Brennan, Torres began, but Paige interrupted. I want to make a deal. Her voice came out desperate. I'll tell you everything. Every detail. Every plan. Just, please. I have a son. I can't go to prison. I can't. You should have thought about that before you conspired to commit murder, Torres said coldly. Before you tried to destroy an innocent woman's life and frame an innocent man. Before you made your 8-year-old son choose between loyalty to his mother and doing the right thing. As they led Paige away, she looked back at Vanessa one last time. I really did hate you, she said softly. From the moment Mom married your dad, you had everything I wanted, and you didn't even appreciate it. Then she was gone. The room fell silent, except for Benji's quiet crying. Vanessa held him close, stroking his hair, while Cameron finally approached the bed and took her free hand. Richard stood by the window, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. I'm so sorry, he said without turning around. I brought her into our lives. I brought this poison into our family. I should have seen it. I should have known. Dad, Vanessa said quietly, you loved her. You trusted her. That's not a crime. What she did, what they did, that's on them, not you. But even as she said it, Vanessa knew the scars from this would run deep. Torres stepped back into the room, putting away her handcuffs. We're going to need full statements from all of you, but that can wait until tomorrow. Get some rest, process this. And Benji? She crouched down to the boy's level. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel good right now. But you saved lives today. Your aunt's life, Cameron's life. You're a hero. Benji didn't look like he felt like a hero. He looked like a little boy who'd just lost his mother. But he nodded, and he held on to Vanessa a little tighter. Family, pause here and think. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us everything. Sometimes the truth destroys the people we love. But staying silent, that destroys us. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and truth? Drop a comment, because this story isn't over yet. 3 months later, Vanessa sat in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and broken promises. The trial had been fast-tracked, given the overwhelming evidence. Helen's computer, Paige's phone records, the forged documents, the fake ultrasound, Benji's recordings. Everything painted a clear picture of conspiracy and intent. But fast didn't mean easy. Vanessa had spent 12 weeks reliving the worst day of her life over and over, testifying, answering questions, watching her father break down on the witness stand when he described how he'd trusted Helen completely, how he'd never suspected anything, watching Benji, pale and small in his button-up shirt, tell a judge what he'd overheard, what he'd found, how scared he'd been that no one would believe him. Now, finally, it was sentencing day. Judge Catherine Morrison had heard all the evidence, seen all the documents, listened to all the testimony. Her face was stern as she looked down at Helen and Paige standing before her. Helen stood straight-backed and defiant. even in her orange jumpsuit. She'd shown no remorse throughout the entire trial, had maintained that she was simply looking out for her daughter's interests, and that everything had been blown out of proportion. Paige, on the other hand, looked like she'd aged a decade. Her hair hung limp. Her eyes were hollow. She'd cried through most of the trial, though Vanessa couldn't tell if the tears were genuine remorse or self-pity. Helen Brennan, Judge Morrison began, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom. I have presided over many cases in my 23 years on the bench, but rarely have I seen such calculated, cold-blooded manipulation. You married a grieving widower, inserted yourself into his daughter's life, and spent 5 years plotting to steal her inheritance and destroy her future. Your conspiracy included plans for murder, premeditated and detailed murder, of an innocent man whose only crime was loving the woman you were trying to destroy. Period. Helen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. For conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 20 years. For fraud and forgery, an additional 5 years. For identity theft and attempted grand larceny, 3 years. These sentences will run consecutively. That's 28 years in state prison. Is that actually happening? As Vanessa held inhale, sharply beside her. 28 years. Helen was 53. She'd be 81 when she got out. If she got out. Paige Brennan, you were complicit in every aspect of this conspiracy. You willingly participated in a scheme to destroy your stepsister's wedding, steal her inheritance, and murder her fiancé. However, the court does recognize that you were heavily influenced by your mother, and that your cooperation with investigators helped fill in gaps in the case. Paige's lawyer stepped closer to her, a hand on her shoulder. For your role in conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 12 years. For fraud and identity theft, an additional 3 years. 15 years total. Paige's knees buckled. Her lawyer caught her. She turned, looking desperately at Benji, who sat between Vanessa and Richard. I'm sorry, Paige mouthed. Baby, I'm so sorry. Benji looked down at his hands. He didn't respond. As the bailiffs led Helen and Paige away, Helen turned one last time. Her eyes found Vanessa across the courtroom, and for a moment, the mask slipped completely. Pure hatred stared back. You ruined everything, Helen said, her voice low and vicious. I spent 5 years playing nice with you. And for what? You still get to walk away with your perfect life while my daughter rots in prison. While I rot in prison. You took everything from us. No, Vanessa said quietly, standing up. You took everything from yourselves. I never did anything to you except exist, and that was enough for you to hate me. Helen laughed, sharp and bitter. You're so naive. You really think you're safe now? You really think this is over? There are things in motion you don't even know about. Plans we made that you'll never. That's enough, Judge Morrison snapped. Remove her. But Helen's words followed Vanessa out of the courtroom like a curse. The aftermath wasn't clean. It never is. The financial investigation revealed that Helen had been siphoning money from Richard's accounts for 3 years. Small amounts at first. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts. By the time they'd finished their audit, she'd stolen nearly $400,000. The bulk of Vanessa's trust fund was intact, but the legal fees to untangle everything, the forensic accounting, the trial costs, it all added up. What should have been $2.8 million became $1.9 million after everything was settled. Still a fortune, still life-changing, but also a reminder that Helen had managed to steal even in failure. Cameron's frozen sperm had been destroyed per his request after the trial. He couldn't stand knowing it existed, knowing what Paige had planned to do with it. The fertility clinic faced a massive lawsuit for the security breach that had allowed the theft in the first place. And then there was Benji. Paige's parental rights were suspended pending her incarceration. The state wanted to place Benji in foster care. He had no other family. Paige had been an only child, and her father had died years before she'd married into Vanessa's family. So Vanessa did the only thing that made sense. She became his guardian. The legal process took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of home studies and background checks and interviews with social workers who kept asking if she was sure she wanted to take on an 8-year-old boy who just lost his mother to prison. He's not just some boy, Vanessa had told the social worker firmly. He's my nephew. He saved my life. He saved Cameron's life. And he needs someone who loves him. I'm that someone. On a cold November afternoon, Benji moved into Vanessa and Cameron's 2-bedroom apartment with a duffel bag of clothes and a backpack of toys. They'd postponed their wedding indefinitely. The idea of planning another ceremony, of standing in front of people again, of wearing white and making promises, it all felt impossible, too raw, too soon. But they were together, and now they were parents. Vanessa had no idea what she was doing. Benji had nightmares. He'd wake up screaming about his mother being taken away, about Grandma Helen coming back, about police officers and courtrooms. Vanessa would sit on the edge of his bed, rubbing his back, singing the same lullaby her own mother had sung to her before cancer took her voice. He struggled in school. His grades dropped. Other kids asked questions about his mom. And when the truth came out, because truth always comes out, they treated him like a curiosity, a tragedy. The boy whose mother tried to commit murder. Vanessa pulled him out of public school and enrolled him in a smaller, private school 20 minutes away. She cut her hours at the hospital to be home when he got off the bus. Cameron adjusted his work schedule to handle morning drop-offs. They went to therapy, all 3 of them, individual sessions for each of them, and family sessions together. It's okay to love her and hate what she did, the therapist told Benji gently. Those 2 feelings can exist at the same time. But Benji just shook his head. I don't think I love her anymore. Is that bad? Am I bad for not loving my mom? Vanessa had to leave the room to cry. The first year was the hardest. Money was tighter than it should have been. The inheritance was tied up in trusts and investments that took time to access. Legal fees kept coming. Appeals from Helen's lawyer, motions from Paige's attorney, trying to reduce her sentence, restitution hearings. Cameron's business took a hit. Clients who'd heard about the scandal, who'd seen his name in the papers connected to a conspiracy and attempted murder plot. Some of them pulled out. It didn't matter that he was the victim. Association was enough. They burned through savings. Took out a loan to cover Benji's new school tuition and therapy costs. Vanessa picked up extra shifts when she could, but 8-year-olds need someone home, need stability, need attention. They fought about money, about Benji, about the wedding that still hadn't happened, about whether they should just go to the courthouse and sign papers and be done with it. This isn't what I wanted, Vanessa said one night after a particularly brutal argument about bills. I wanted a partner, not this chaos, this struggle. Cameron had looked at her with exhausted eyes. You want to leave? No. Yes. I don't know. Vanessa had put her head in her hands. I'm so tired, Cameron. I'm so tired of fighting, of struggling, of waiting for the next bomb to drop. Helen's in prison. Paige is in prison. There are no more bombs. But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. Paige called from prison once a month. The facility allowed her one 15-minute phone call, and she always used it to call Vanessa's number, begging to speak to Benji. The first few times, Vanessa had let him take the calls, but they destroyed him. He'd spend days afterward, quiet and withdrawn, his nightmares returning with a vengeance. So Vanessa stopped accepting the calls, let them go to voicemail. Paige's voice, desperate and pleading. "Please, let me talk to my son. Please. He's all I have. Please don't take him from me." It made Vanessa feel like the villain in someone else's story. Year 2 was slightly better, and also worse. Benji turned 9, then 10. He grew 3 inches, started playing soccer, made friends who didn't know his history because their parents didn't gossip, or at least not where their kids could hear. But he also started asking harder questions. Do you think she really loved me? Or was I just part of her plan? Will I grow up to be like her, like Grandma Helen? Is being bad genetic? Why did you keep me? You could have let them put me in foster care. Your life would be easier. Questions that had no good answers. Questions that broke Vanessa's heart every time. Cameron proposed again, differently this time. They were sitting on their apartment balcony on a Tuesday night, Benji asleep inside after a particularly rough day at school. They'd been talking about refinancing the loan, about Cameron's business finally stabilizing, about whether they could afford to move to a bigger place. And Cameron had said, "Marry me." No ring, no fanfare, just those 2 words, quiet and honest. What? Vanessa had looked at him in the dim light from the living room. Marry me. Not because everything's perfect, not because we figured it all out. Marry me because we're choosing this every day anyway. Might as well make it official. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard, Vanessa had said, but she was crying. It's honest. When? Whenever you're ready. Courthouse. Small. Just us and Benji and your dad. No production. No guests. No chance for anything to go wrong. Vanessa had looked through the sliding door at Benji asleep on the couch, his small body curled under the blanket she'd tucked around him, at this boy who'd saved her life and become her son, at this messy, imperfect family they'd built from the wreckage. Okay, she'd whispered. Yes, they planned it for 3 months later. Small, simple, low-key, but even simple didn't mean easy. Family, let me ask you something. When does healing actually begin? When the bad guys are punished, or when you finally learn to live with the scars they left? Comment below. Because this family is about to find out that moving forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind. The courthouse on a Tuesday morning in April was nothing like the Riverside estate had been. No exposed brick draped in ivory fabric. No candles on every surface. No vintage chairs or string quartets or 230 guests dressed in their finest. Just fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and a waiting area with plastic chairs bolted to the ground. Vanessa wore a simple cream dress she'd bought off the rack at Nordstrom for $200. No veil, no train, no pearl choker. She'd put that away in a drawer and hadn't been able to look at it since. Cameron wore a navy suit, the same one he wore to business meetings. He'd gotten a haircut the day before, but he'd missed a spot in the back. Vanessa had noticed it that morning and said nothing. It felt right somehow, imperfect, real. Benji sat between them in the waiting area, swinging his legs. He'd turned 10 3 weeks ago, and Vanessa could see the man he'd become someday in the angles of his face. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt, and he'd insisted on a tie, even though no one else was wearing one. "You look handsome, buddy," Cameron had told him that morning. Thanks, Dad, Benji had replied without thinking. And then his eyes had gone wide, terrified he'd overstepped. But Cameron had just pulled him into a hug and said nothing, because some moments are too big for words. Richard sat across from them, looking older but steadier than he had in 2 years. He'd sold the house he'd shared with Helen. Couldn't stand to be there anymore, he said. Bought a small condo closer to Vanessa and Benji. Started therapy. Started rebuilding. Cameron's parents, Linda and Robert, sat beside Richard. They'd been skeptical at first, back when the scandal had broken. Had wondered privately if their son was getting involved in something too complicated, too damaged. But then they'd met Benji, and they'd seen how Cameron and Vanessa fought for each other, not just with each other. And they'd come around. 2 other people sat in the waiting area. Vanessa's best friend from nursing school, Christina, who'd flown in from Portland, and Cameron's business partner, Marcus, who'd stood by him when other associates had quietly distanced themselves. 8 people total. That was the whole wedding party. Foster Cole party? A clerk called from the doorway, clipboard in hand. They all stood. Vanessa felt her heart start to race. Her hands went clammy. This was it. 2.5 years after the first attempt. 2.5 years of trials and therapy and late-night conversations about whether they were crazy to keep trying. She felt Cameron's hand find hers, squeeze once. His palm was sweating, too. They followed the clerk down a hallway to a small courtroom. Not even a real courtroom, just a room with a judge's bench and an American flag and chairs for witnesses. Judge Patricia Chen waited for them, smiling warmly. She was younger than Vanessa had expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose. Good morning, everyone. I'm Judge Chen, and I'll be officiating this marriage today. I understand this is a long time coming. You could say that, Cameron said, and everyone laughed. The sound broke the tension like glass shattering. They arranged themselves in front of the judge, Cameron and Vanessa in the center. Benji stood beside Vanessa, holding the rings in his pocket with the same seriousness he'd had at the first wedding. Judge Chen began the ceremony, the traditional words, the legal requirements. But she spoke them with warmth, like she meant them. Marriage is not about perfection, she said, looking between Cameron and Vanessa. It's about commitment, about choosing each other when it's easy and when it's hard, about building something together that's stronger than what either of you could build alone. Vanessa felt tears prick her eyes. Cameron, do you take Vanessa to be your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live? Cameron's voice was steady. I do. Vanessa, do you take Cameron to be your husband? A crash from the hallway. Everyone jumped. Benji dropped the rings. They clattered across the floor, rolling under a chair. Sorry, a maintenance worker's voice called from outside. Dropped a bucket. Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Benji scrambled to retrieve the rings, his face red. Judge Chen smiled. Well, that's one way to keep things interesting. Benji, you got those rings? Yes, ma'am. Benji held them up, one in each hand, looking mortified. Perfect. Now, Vanessa, as I was saying, do you take Cameron to be your husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live? Vanessa opened her mouth to say I do, and instead she started crying. Not delicate tears, not pretty crying, full, ugly sobbing that came from somewhere deep in her chest where she'd been holding everything for 2.5 years. Cameron pulled her into his arms. Hey, it's okay. We don't have to do this if you're not ready. No. Vanessa shook her head against his chest. No, I want to. I'm so scared. Me too, Cameron whispered into her hair. What if something else goes wrong? Then we'll handle it. Together. Vanessa pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Her mascara was definitely running. She probably looked like a raccoon. But Cameron was looking at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. I do, she said, her voice thick with tears. I really, really do. Judge Chen's own eyes were suspiciously shiny. Well then, by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. The kiss was salty with tears and slightly off-center because Vanessa was still crying and Cameron was laughing. And it was nothing like the perfect kiss Vanessa had imagined on her first wedding day. It was better because it was real. Their tiny group erupted into applause. Benji whooped. Linda was openly weeping. Richard was taking photos on his phone with shaking hands. And just like that, they were married. They went to a diner afterward. The same diner where Cameron had taken Vanessa on their first date 4 years ago. Red vinyl booths and checkered floors and a jukebox in the corner that only played songs from the 50s. They pushed 3 tables together and ordered too much food. Pancakes and burgers and milkshakes. Because why not? Because life was short and they'd spent too much of it being afraid. Benji got chocolate all over his nice shirt. Cameron's tie ended up dipped in syrup. Vanessa laughed until her stomach hurt. Until the fear that had been living in her chest for 2 years finally loosened its grip. Marcus gave a toast with his coffee mug. To Cameron and Vanessa, you've been through hell and somehow came out the other side. Here's to the next adventure being way more boring. I'll drink to that, Cameron said. They were home by 2 in the afternoon. Benji needed a nap. All the excitement had worn him out, and Cameron had a work call he couldn't reschedule. So Vanessa changed into sweatpants and made tea and sat on the couch with the marriage certificate in her hands, staring at their names written in official black ink. Vanessa Marie Cole Foster. She'd hyphenated, kept part of herself and took part of him. A compromise, a blending. The mail came while she was sitting there. Cameron brought it in, sorting through bills and junk mail. Then he stopped. Vanessa. The tone of his voice made her look up. He was holding an envelope, prison postmark, Paige's handwriting. Don't, Vanessa said immediately. Just throw it away. It's addressed to Benji. Vanessa's stomach dropped. She knows she's not allowed to contact him directly. I know. Cameron turned the envelope over in his hands, but she found a way anyway. They sat there for a long moment, staring at the letter like it was a bomb. We should read it first, Vanessa said finally, before we decide whether to give it to him. Cameron nodded. He opened the envelope carefully, pulling out 2 handwritten pages. They read it together, Cameron holding the pages between them. Dear Benji, I know I'm not supposed to write to you. I know the court said I can't contact you until you're 18 and can decide for yourself. But today is your Aunt Vanessa's wedding day. I still know the date even in here, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. I've been in prison for 2 years now. I have 13 more to go. By the time I get out, you'll be 23 years old. You'll be a man. You probably won't even remember me. I need you to know something. Everything I did was wrong. Not just legally wrong, morally wrong. I was angry and jealous, and I let your grandmother poison me against people who never did anything to deserve it. But you were never part of the plan, Benji. You were always the one good thing I did right, and when you stood up and told the truth, even though you knew it would destroy me, you showed more courage and character than I've ever had. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to see you. I know that's not what's best for you. I'm just asking that you know this. I loved you. I love you. And every day in here, I think about the mother I should have been and wasn't. The mother you deserved and never got. Vanessa is your mother now in all the ways that matter. She'll raise you with the love and honesty I should have given you. Cameron will be the father figure I never gave you the chance to have. And that's how it should be. Be good, baby. Be honest. Be brave. Like you were in that hospital room. And maybe, someday, when you're older, if you want to know who I was before I became this, maybe you'll come visit. Or maybe you won't. Either way, I'll understand. I love you. I'm sorry. And I'm proud of who you're becoming, even though I don't get to be part of it. Mom. Vanessa finished reading and realized she was crying again. She'd cried more today than she had in months. Do we give it to him? Cameron asked, quietly. I don't know. Vanessa wiped her eyes. It's honest. It's not manipulative. But it could still hurt him. Or it could give him closure. Or it could open old wounds. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Benji appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up on one side. I heard you guys talking, he said. Did Mom write to me? Vanessa and Cameron exchanged a look. Then Vanessa nodded. She did. Can I read it? Are you sure? We can wait. You don't have to. I want to. Benji walked over, his small hand outstretched. Please. Vanessa gave him the letter, watched his eyes move across the pages, watched his face go through a dozen expressions, anger, sadness, confusion, something that might have been relief. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. She said she's proud of me, he said quietly. She should be, Cameron said. You're an amazing kid. She said you're my mom now, the mom that matters. Benji looked at Vanessa. Is that okay? That she said that? Vanessa knelt down to his level. Is it okay with you? Benji thought about it for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, because it's true. You're my mom, not because you gave birth to me, but because you chose me. You keep choosing me. Vanessa pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. Always, she whispered, I will always choose you. That night, after Benji was asleep and Cameron was in the shower, Vanessa stood at the window of their apartment, looking out at the city lights. She thought about everything that had led to this moment, the wedding that had exploded, the conspiracy that had unraveled, the trial, the sentencing, the 2 years of struggling and fighting and building something from the ashes of what had been destroyed. She thought about the mother she'd lost to cancer, the stepmother who'd tried to destroy her, the sister who'd betrayed her, the nephew who'd saved her. She thought about tomorrow, about the bills that would still be waiting, about Paige in prison for 13 more years, about Helen growing old behind bars, about Benji's nightmares that still came sometimes, about the therapy appointments they'd need to keep attending, about the hard conversations that still waited in the years ahead. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she was 25 and dreaming of her wedding day. Wasn't the fairy tale with the perfect kiss and the happily ever after where everything was resolved and tied with a bow. It was messier, harder, more complicated. But it was also more honest, more earned, more real. Cameron came up behind her, fresh from the shower, and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? Everything, nothing. Tomorrow. Worried? Always. Vanessa leaned back against him. But also hopeful. Is that weird? To be scared and hopeful at the same time? No. Cameron kissed the top of her head. I think that's just called being alive. Are you happy? The question came out before Vanessa could stop it. Cameron was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm choosing to be. Every day, I wake up and I choose this, us, Benji, this life. It's not the life I planned. It's harder than I expected, but it's ours. And that makes it enough. Vanessa turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the dim light from the street lamps outside. I love you. I love you too. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. Down the hall, Benji cried out in his sleep. Both of them tensed, listening, but he settled quickly. The nightmare passing without needing them. He's getting better, Cameron said softly. We all are, Vanessa replied. Slowly, but we are. They stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other, looking out at the city that had witnessed their worst day and was now witnessing their new beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They both knew that. Helen wouldn't stop filing appeals from prison. Paige would keep trying to reach Benji in whatever ways she could find. Money would stay tight for a while longer. The past would keep echoing into the present in ways they couldn't predict. But tomorrow would also bring Benji's laughter over breakfast, Cameron's terrible jokes that always made Vanessa groan, the small moments of joy that had become their new normal, the choice, made over and over again, to keep building something good from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. Hey, Cameron said, pulling back to look at her. We did it. We actually did it. Got married in a courthouse with syrup on your tie. Built a family from absolutely nothing. Survived the worst thing we could imagine. Came out the other side, together. Vanessa smiled, feeling tears threaten again. But this time they felt different. Lighter. Like release instead of pain. Yeah, she said. We did. And that night, as they lay in bed in their small apartment, with Benji sleeping safely down the hall, Vanessa finally understood something that had eluded her for 2.5 years. Healing wasn't about erasing the scars. It wasn't about going back to who she'd been before Paige had stood up at that wedding. It wasn't about pretending the pain had never happened. Healing was about carrying the scars and choosing to move forward anyway, about building something new that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it, about finding joy, not despite the trauma, but alongside it, about learning that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when showing up was hard. She thought about the girl she'd been at 29, walking down the aisle in her mother's pearls, believing that marriage was the beginning of happily ever after. That girl had been naive, innocent, unprepared for how cruel the world could be. But that girl had also been strong. Strong enough to survive. Strong enough to fight. Strong enough to become the woman who now lay in the darkness, married to a good man, raising a brave boy, building a life that mattered. Cameron, she whispered into the darkness. Thank you. For what? For staying. For choosing this. For believing we could make it, when I wasn't sure we would. She felt him shift, pulling her closer. Always, Vanessa. I'll always choose this. Choose us. Choose you. And as Vanessa drifted off to sleep on her wedding night, 2.5 years late, but right on time, she realized something else. This wasn't the ending she'd dreamed of. It was better. Because it was real. Family, let me leave you with this. Sometimes the people closest to you, the ones who sit at your table, who smile in your photos, who call you family, are the ones plotting your destruction. And sometimes, the smallest voice in the room, a child brave enough to tell the truth, is the one that saves your life. Vanessa's story teaches us that justice isn't always clean. Healing isn't always fast. And happy endings don't mean perfect endings. They mean choosing love when it's easier to walk away. choosing honesty when lies would be more comfortable, choosing to build something real instead of settling for something that just looks good. If this story moved you, hit that like button. If you believe in truth and justice and second chances, comment "I choose love" below. And if you want more stories about real people surviving real betrayals and finding real healing, subscribe to this channel. Because these stories, they matter. Your support helps me bring them to light. Remember, you are loved beyond measure. You are stronger than your worst day. And you are never, ever alone. Until next time, family, keep choosing love, keep choosing truth, and keep believing that even the most broken things can be made whole again. This is your storyteller, signing off. Stay blessed, stay strong, and keep choosing each other.